Welcome to Sleepy Travel Stories. Tonight, let me take you on a journey to a faraway place. Close your eyes, relax, and let the world drift away. The car door closes with a soft whisper behind you, and suddenly the world transforms. After hours of travel, after the gentle hum of engines and the rhythm of wheels on distant roads, you find yourself standing at the entrance to something that feels less like a destination and more like a doorway into another realm entirely. The late afternoon sun filters through towering palms above, creating shifting patterns of gold and amber that dance across your shoulders, warming your skin with the kind of gentle heat that seems to melt away every trace of tension you didn't even realize you were carrying. Before you stretches a pathway of weathered stone, each piece worn smooth by countless footsteps and tropical rains, leading toward what can only be described as a vision suspended between earth and sky. The hanging gardens of this Balinese resort unfold before you, like pages from an ancient dream, terraced levels of verdant beauty that seem to cascade down the hillside in perfect natural harmony. You can hear the gentle murmur of water somewhere ahead, a sound so soft and constant it might be the resort's own quiet heartbeat, drawing you forward with each melodic note. The air here carries scents you've never quite experienced before. The green freshness of tropical foliage mingling with the sweet perfume of frangipani blossoms, underscored by something deeper and earthier, like rich soil after a gentle rain. Each breath fills your lungs not just with oxygen, but with a sense of arrival, of having finally reached a place where time moves differently, where the urgent pace of the world beyond these gardens simply cannot follow. As you take your first steps along the stone pathway, your footsteps create the softest sound, a gentle rhythm that seems to blend seamlessly with the natural music of this place. To your left, a series of carved water features sends thin streams cascading from one moss-covered basin to another, the water catching the filtered sunlight and throwing tiny rainbows against the dark volcanic stone. The sound is hypnotic, not the rushing crash of a waterfall, but something more intimate, like nature whispering secrets to itself in a language made entirely of liquid notes. Your fingers trail along a handrail carved from what appears to be a single piece of teak, its surface polished to silk by weather and time. The wood is warm beneath your palm, and you can feel the subtle grain patterns, each line telling the story of seasons and growth, of this tree's long journey from seedling to shelter for countless tropical storms before finding its purpose here, guiding visitors like yourself into this suspended paradise. The pathway curves gently to the right, and suddenly the full scope of the hanging gardens reveals itself. Tier upon tier of carefully tended green spaces stretch both above and below you, connected by stone staircases that seem to grow organically from the hillside itself. Ancient-looking stone lanterns dot the landscape, their weathered surfaces speaking of decades of quiet service, waiting to cast their warm glow when evening falls. Even now, unlit, they add a sense of timeless ceremony to the scene, like silent guardians watching over this carefully cultivated Eden. You pause at a small overlook, your hands resting on the smooth stone balustrade, and allow your gaze to wander across the remarkable vista. Each terrace below holds its own miniature world of botanical wonders. On one level, you spot the broad elephant ear leaves of tropical plants whose names you don't know, but whose beauty speaks a universal language. Their surfaces gleam with a subtle sheen, as if each leaf has been lovingly polished by the humid air itself. Nearby, clusters of bird of paradise flowers stretch their orange and blue petals toward the sun like exotic dancers frozen in mid-gesture. Their colors, so vivid, they seem to pulse with their own inner light. The engineering marvel of it all strikes you gradually, not as an intrusion of human ambition upon nature, but as a collaboration so seamless it feels inevitable. The retaining walls appear to have been carved from the living rock of the hillside, their surfaces already claimed by delicate ferns and climbing vines that soften every edge, blurring the line between what was built and what simply grew. Narrow channels guide water along pathways that follow the natural contours of the land, creating a network of gentle streams that nourish every corner of this elevated paradise. A warm breeze stirs the air around you, carrying with it the rustle of palm fronds high above, and the softer whisper of bamboo leaves brushing against each other like nature's own wind chimes. The sound is deeply soothing, a constant gentle percussion that seems designed specifically to slow your breathing, to encourage your shoulders to release their grip on the stress of arrival, of travel, of the busy world you've temporarily left behind. Moving further along the pathway, you discover that each turn offers new perspectives, new combinations of color and texture and sound. Here, a small grove of bamboo creates a natural pavilion, the tall stalks swaying with such fluid grace they might be underwater plants moved by invisible currents. The light filtering through their leaves creates an ever-shifting pattern on the ground beneath your feet, a living kaleidoscope of green and gold that transforms with every breath of wind. Just beyond the bamboo, a traditional Balinese stone statue emerges from a carefully arranged garden of ferns and flowering shrubs. The carving depicts a serene figure in meditation, its features worn gentle by weather and time, but its peaceful expression still clear and somehow reassuring. Flowers have been placed at its base, fresh offerings of white frangipani and deep purple orchids that someone has arranged with obvious care and reverence. The fragrance rises from these blossoms in waves, sweet and complex, adding another layer to the sensory symphony that seems to envelop you more completely with each passing moment. The attention to detail everywhere you look is extraordinary, yet never feels forced or overly manicured. A cluster of prayer flags strung between two flowering trees flutters gently in the breeze, their bright colors, saffron yellow, deep red, pure white, forest green, creating moving points of interest against the verdant backdrop. The fabric is soft and well weathered, suggesting these flags have been here long enough to become part of the garden's natural rhythm, their gentle movement as much a part of the landscape as the swaying of the plants themselves. As the pathway leads you gradually downward, you begin to notice the subtle changes in the garden's character. The plants here grow more lush and dense, benefiting from the natural flow of water and nutrients down the hillside. Broad-leaved plants create intimate alcoves where stone benches wait in dappled shade, positioned perfectly to take advantage of views across the lower terraces. Each seating area feels like a private meditation spot, designed for quiet contemplation of the beauty that surrounds you on all sides. The water features become more elaborate as you descend, evolving from simple cascades to more complex arrangements of pools and channels. In one particularly enchanting spot, water flows through a series of carved stone vessels, each one at a slightly different height, creating a gentle musical progression as the water moves from container to container. The sound is mesmerizing, not loud enough to dominate the peaceful atmosphere, but present enough to provide a constant thread of tranquility that weaves through all the other gentle sounds of this place. You pause beside one of these water features, and on impulse, you cup your hands to catch some of the flowing water. It's surprisingly cool against your palms and perfectly clear. A few drops escape between your fingers, creating tiny ripples in the pool below. And for a moment, you're transfixed by the simple beauty of this small interaction between your presence and the garden's eternal rhythms. When you lift your wet hands to your face, the water carries the pure, clean scent of mountain springs, reminding you that all of this beauty is fed by natural sources high in the Balinese hills. The realization dawns on you gradually that this garden exists in perfect balance, not static, but dynamically stable, constantly growing and changing while maintaining its essential character of peace and beauty. Butterflies drift between the flowers with no apparent urgency, their wings catching the light like stained glass windows come to life. You spot several varieties, some with wings of deep blue, shot through with silver, others displaying patterns of orange and black so intricate they might have been designed by master artists working in the medium of living color. A small lizard darts across the pathway in front of you, pausing for just a moment on a sun-warmed stone before disappearing into the undergrowth. Its presence, brief as it is, reminds you that this garden is not merely a static display, but a living ecosystem, home to countless creatures who have found their place within this carefully maintained paradise. The thought fills you with a quiet joy, to know that your temporary visit makes you, however briefly, part of this thriving community of life. The late afternoon light continues its slow transformation, growing warmer and more golden as the sun begins its gentle descent toward the horizon. This changing light reveals new aspects of the garden's beauty, shadows that weren't visible moments before now define the subtle curves of the terraced levels, while highlights pick out individual flowers and leaves, making them glow like natural jewels scattered throughout the green abundance surrounding you. As you continue your unhurried exploration, you come upon a small pavilion constructed entirely from bamboo and traditional thatch. Its design is elegant in its simplicity, open on all sides to take advantage of the cooling breezes, with a roof that provides gentle shade without blocking the view of the garden levels that stretch both above and below this perfect vantage point. Inside, floor cushions covered in naturally dyed fabric wait in the soft shadows, positioned to take advantage of every perspective this central location offers. From this pavilion, you can see the full scope of what the resort's designers and gardeners have accomplished. The hanging gardens flow down the hillside in a series of graceful curves, each terrace a carefully composed arrangement of plants, water, and stone that contributes to the larger harmony while maintaining its own unique character. Some levels emphasize flowering plants in warm colors, reds and oranges and bright yellows that seem to capture and concentrate the tropical sunlight. Others focus on the infinite variations of green that tropical foliage provides, from the pale lime of new growth to the deep forest tones of mature leaves. The integration with the natural landscape is so complete that it's impossible to determine where the original hillside ends and the resort's enhancements begin. This is clearly the result not of imposing a foreign vision upon the land, but of working with the existing contours and natural water flow, enhancing what was already beautiful rather than replacing it with something entirely artificial. A gentle chiming draws your attention to wind chimes hanging from the pavilion's eaves, their bamboo tubes creating soft, woody notes that blend perfectly with all the other gentle sounds of this place. The melody they create is random, yet somehow always harmonious, as if the wind itself has learned to play this instrument with the skill of a master musician. You settle onto one of the cushions, feeling the soft give of the fabric and the firm support of the woven mat beneath, and allow yourself to simply absorb the full sensory experience of being here, in this moment, surrounded by such carefully cultivated beauty. From this restful position, your eyes can wander freely across the gardens, discovering new details and relationships you hadn't noticed during your walk. The way certain plants have been grouped to create natural color progressions. The strategic placement of larger trees to provide shade and wind protection for more delicate flowers. The clever use of different leaf textures and sizes to create visual interest even in areas where few plants are actually blooming. But perhaps most remarkable of all is the sense of timelessness that pervades everything you see. This garden feels both ancient and eternally renewed, as if it has existed in some form for centuries, while continuing to grow and evolve with each passing season. It's a place where human creativity and natural beauty have found a way to collaborate so completely that the result transcends what either could accomplish alone, creating something that speaks to the deepest part of your soul, that part that remembers what it feels like to be truly at peace, truly at home in the world. Your feet seem to find the beginning of this pathway almost without conscious thought, as if the gardens themselves are gently guiding you forward from that first breathtaking overlook. The transition happens so naturally that you barely notice when the wide viewing area gives way to something more intimate, more exploratory. Here, carved into the hillside with the patience of generations, wins a stone pathway that seems to have grown from the earth itself, rather than being imposed upon it. The stones beneath your feet are neither uniform nor random. Each one has been chosen and placed with an artist's eye for how it will catch the light, how its surface will feel under bare feet or sandals, how its particular shade of grey or cream or pale gold will complement the stone beside it. Some are smooth river rocks, worn silk-soft by countless years of water's patient touch. Others retain just enough texture to provide gentle traction, their surfaces carved with the faintest suggestion of patterns that might be lotus petals or waves, or simply the natural grain of the stone itself, enhanced by skillful hands. As you begin to follow this winding path downward, the first thing that strikes you is how perfectly it seems to understand the natural rhythm of unhurried exploration. The pathway doesn't rush you toward any destination. Instead, it curves and meanders with the organic flow of the hillside, sometimes doubling back on itself, sometimes pausing at small alcoves carved into the slope, where a single perfect orchid might be growing from what appears to be solid rock, or where a small shrine holds offerings of frangipani, blossoms whose perfume seems to concentrate in these sheltered spots. The sound of water begins to weave itself more prominently into your awareness as you descend. What started as a distant, almost subliminal whisper from your vantage point above now separates into distinct voices, the bright chatter of water dancing over small stones, the deeper gurgle of streams converging and separating, the soft splash of droplets falling from level to level. It's a symphony performed by water itself, with the stone pathway serving as the perfect acoustic corridor to carry these liquid melodies to your ears. And then you see them, the cascades that give this section of the gardens its character. They're not grand waterfalls demanding attention with their power and noise. These are something more subtle, more integrated into the landscape. Water appears to seep from the hillside itself, emerging from hidden springs and carefully channeled sources to create a series of stepped pools and gentle falls that work their way down the slope alongside your pathway, sometimes crossing under it through carved stone channels, sometimes disappearing entirely, only to resurface further down as if by magic. The word emerald that draws people to describe these cascades becomes immediately clear as you walk among them. The water itself carries the faintest green tint, not the muddy green of algae or runoff, but something cleaner and more mysterious, as if the water has absorbed some essential quality from the jade and serpentine deposits it passes through on its journey from the mountain springs to this hillside garden. When sunlight filters through the canopy above and strikes these flowing streams, the entire pathway seems to shimmer with liquid green light that moves and flows with the water's rhythm. The plants here have adapted to this constantly moisture-rich environment in ways that create an entirely different ecosystem from the overlook above. Ferns unfurl in impossible profusion, their fronds creating layered curtains of green that seem to pulse with the humidity rising from the water. Some are tiny, delicate varieties that cluster in the cracks between stones, their leaves no larger than coins, but so perfectly formed they look like nature's own jewelry. Others spread broad fans that catch and hold droplets, creating temporary mirrors that reflect fragments of sky and canopy before releasing their accumulated moisture in slow, meditative drips. Moss has claimed territories here, with the quiet authority of something that has found its perfect home. It softens the edges of stones, creates cushioned seating areas where the pathway widens into small resting spots, and provides a living carpet that seems to breathe with the humidity. Your feet register the slight give of this moss as you walk, a subtle springiness that makes each step feel more like floating than walking. The color variations in these moss communities are extraordinary. Deep forest greens in the shadowed areas, bright emerald where indirect light penetrates, and even touches of golden green where occasional direct sunbeams find their way through the canopy. The air itself has a different quality here, thickened and sweetened by the constant presence of water and the exhalations of so much thriving plant life. Each breath feels more substantial, more nourishing. You can taste the minerals from the stone, the sweetness from flower nectar carried on the humid air, the green freshness of chlorophyll and growing things. It's air that seems to contain more oxygen than usual, leaving you feeling both energized and deeply relaxed with each inhalation. The pathway's designers understood something profound about the human need for discovery and surprise. Just when you think you've grasped the pattern of this garden level, the relationship between path and water, the rhythm of cascade and pool, the route curves around a moss-covered boulder and reveals something entirely unexpected. Perhaps it's a small grotto where the water has carved out a natural amphitheater in the rock, creating a space of perfect acoustic resonance where every droplet's impact seems amplified and clarified. The sound in such spaces becomes almost musical, as if the water and stone are collaborating to create compositions that exist only in this moment, for your ears alone. Or the surprise might be visual, a place where the pathway opens up just enough to reveal how the cascades above and below connect, showing you the broader choreography of water that you're walking through the middle of. From these vantage points, you begin to understand that what feels like a series of separate small waterfalls is actually one continuous, intentionally designed water feature that spans the entire hillside. The water you are watching flow past your feet at this moment started its journey at springs near the top of the resort property and will eventually find its way to lily ponds and reflecting pools in the gardens below. Sometimes the surprises are more intimate and immediate. You might notice that certain stones in the pathway have been carved with shallow channels that direct small streams of water across the walking surface, creating the option to let the cool flow run over your feet as you walk. These aren't obvious features. You might walk past them entirely if you're not paying attention, or if you're wearing closed shoes. But for the observant walker, especially one who has chosen to experience this garden with bare feet or sandals, these hidden water channels offer moments of unexpected refreshment and connection with the water that is so central to this environment. The temperature here remains remarkably constant, moderated by the thermal mass of the stone pathway and the cooling effect of the constantly evaporating water. Even in the heat of midday, this section of the gardens maintains a microclimate that feels perfectly balanced for human comfort. The stone under your feet never becomes uncomfortably hot, warmed by the sun but cooled by the water and shaded by the strategic positioning of trees and larger shrubs. In the evening, these same stones release their accumulated warmth slowly, creating gentle thermal currents that carry the scents of night-blooming flowers throughout this section of the gardens. The plants growing closest to the cascades have evolved extraordinary strategies for thriving in this environment of constant moisture and filtered light. Orchids have found purchase in what seem like impossible locations, growing from pure rock faces where their roots must navigate tiny cracks to find nutrients, or establishing themselves in the forks of trees where accumulated leaf litter provides just enough soil for their specialized needs. Their blooms appear throughout your walk like small miracles, a spray of purple and white flowers emerging from a cleft in the pathway's retaining wall, or a cascade of yellow blossoms hanging over one of the water features, their reflection doubling the display. Air plants have created their own communities here, requiring no soil at all, but gathering nutrients from the mineral-rich mist and the organic particles carried in the humid air. They festoon certain sections of the pathway like living decorations, their silvery green leaves creating textural contrasts with the more familiar tropical foliage. Some are tiny, no larger than your thumb, clustering in groups that look like abstract sculptures. Others have grown large enough to support ecosystems within ecosystems, their cupped leaves collecting water where tiny frogs make their homes, their root systems providing attachment points for even smaller epiphytic plants. As you continue your descent along this winding stone pathway, your pace naturally slows to match the unhurried rhythm of the water beside you. There's something hypnotic about the way the cascades flow, not with the urgent rush of mountain streams, but with the steady, patient movement of water that has found its perfect channel and feels no need to hurry toward its destination. This rhythm seems to synchronize with your breathing, your heartbeat, the casual swing of your arms as you walk. You find yourself stopping more frequently, not from fatigue, but from a growing appreciation for the small details that reveal themselves only to those who take time to truly look. The interplay between human design and natural process becomes more apparent the longer you spend in this environment. You begin to notice how the pathway's builders worked with the existing water flow rather than imposing an arbitrary route on the landscape. The stones follow the natural contours. The cascades incorporate both springs that were already here and channels that were carefully created to enhance the natural drainage patterns. Even the plantings seem to represent a collaboration between human vision and the preferences of the plants themselves. Species chosen not just for their beauty, but for their ability to thrive in these specific conditions, positioned where they can best succeed and contribute to the overall harmony of the space. The garden's maintenance reveals itself in nearly invisible ways. Leaves that could create slippery surfaces on the wet stones have been cleared away, but fallen petals and seed pods that add to the aesthetic experience remain. The water channels are kept clear of debris that might disrupt the flow, but natural mineral deposits that add interesting colors and textures to the stone surfaces are allowed to develop. It's a level of care that preserves the intended experience while allowing the garden to continue evolving naturally, a balance that requires both technical expertise and artistic sensitivity. Your journey along this pathway through the emerald cascades begins to feel less like walking through a garden and more like participating in an ongoing conversation between water, stone, plant, and human consciousness. A conversation that has been developing for years and will continue long after your visit ends, but one that includes your presence and awareness as a vital element in this moment's particular expression of beauty and peace. This conversation weaves itself into your awareness as the pre-dawn hours begin their gentle transformation, and you find yourself drawn upward along a series of natural stone steps that curve through what the resort staff quietly calls the morning garden. Here, the air carries a different quality entirely, cooler, more substantial, filled with the promise of something about to unfold. The darkness hasn't quite lifted, but it has begun to soften around the edges, like black silk gradually becoming charcoal, then pewter. The frangipani trees that line this ascending pathway seem to understand something about timing that the rest of the world has forgotten. This is an active silence, filled with the barely audible movements of mist particles brushing against leaves, the soft breathing of the earth as it releases and absorbs moisture, the distant call of a morning bird somewhere beyond the vapor. Occasionally, a gentle breeze stirs the mist into new formations, and you hear the whispered rustle of frangipani petals touching each other on their branches, like natural wind chimes made of living tissue. Your feet find their way along a path that appears just a step ahead of you, the smooth stones emerging from the mist only when you're almost upon them. This creates a sensation of walking through time itself, each step revealing the immediate future while allowing the immediate past to dissolve behind you into the grey-white embrace of the vapor. The uncertainty is strangely comforting, requiring you to trust your body's natural balance and wisdom rather than your eyes. Somewhere in the mist, ahead you hear the sound of water falling, not the structured fountains from below, but something more natural. As you move toward this sound, following a path that curves around what feels like a large tree trunk, the mist parts just enough to reveal a small waterfall cascading over volcanic rock into a pool lined with smooth river stones. The water appears to be falling out of the mist itself, as if the vapor has condensed so completely that it has remembered how to become liquid again. The pool at the base of this waterfall steams slightly, indicating a natural warmth that draws your attention. Smooth stone seats have been carved into the rock formation at the pool's edge, positioned so that someone sitting there would be surrounded by mist while still being able to hear and see the water's movement. The combination of the warm pool, the cool mist, and the continuous cascade creates its own microclimate, a pocket of perfect atmospheric balance. As you approach these stone seats, the mist shifts again, and suddenly you can see more of your surroundings. The terrace extends further than you initially realized, with multiple levels connected by natural rock steps. Each level hosts different arrangements of tropical plants, all chosen for their ability to thrive in this humid, sheltered environment. Massive philodendron leaves emerge from the mist, like green umbrellas, their surfaces beaded with perfect water droplets that catch and scatter the growing light. The frangipani presence here is overwhelming in the most beautiful way. The trees are so abundant and mature that their fragrance doesn't come in waves anymore, but exists as a constant living atmosphere. Breathing becomes an act of taking this sweetness directly into your body, where it seems to settle into your bones and blood, creating a sensation of being perfumed from the inside out. The blossoms fall continuously, a gentle rain of white and coral, petals that accumulates in soft drifts along the pathway and floats on the surface of the warming pool. Settling onto one of the carved stone seats, you feel the volcanic rock's retained warmth seeping through your body, while the cool mist continues to move around and over you. This contrast creates the most exquisite physical sensation, supported and warmed from below, caressed and cooled from above, surrounded by fragrance so dense it feels almost edible. The waterfall's sound becomes a background rhythm that your heartbeat seems to synchronize with automatically. From this seated position, partially veiled by mist, you can observe the garden's gradual awakening. The vapor moves in response to temperature changes too subtle for human skin to detect, creating slow-motion dances of concealment and revelation. A cluster of red ginger flowers appears through the mist, brilliant and sharp, then fades again as the vapor shifts. A section of bamboo grove materializes, the tall stalks disappearing upward into the grey-white unknown, then dissolves back into mystery. The light is changing now, though you can't see the sun itself through the mist. The overall illumination grows gradually stronger, transforming the vapor from grey to silver to the faintest hint of gold. This light seems to come from everywhere and nowhere, diffused through countless water particles until the air itself becomes luminous. The frangipani blossoms respond to this increasing light by appearing to intensify their own glow, as if they're mirrors reflecting and amplifying the morning's energy. This golden luminescence begins to dance on surfaces you hadn't fully noticed in the earlier dimness. As you move along the garden path, drawn by some gentle instinct toward the sound of water that isn't quite rainfall, you discover that the terraced levels of this resort descend further than you'd imagined. Each stone step downward reveals another layer of this hanging paradise, and with each descent, the quality of light shifts subtly. The mist grows thinner here, less dense, allowing glimpses of something that catches and holds the morning's growing radiance. Then you see it, a pool that seems to have no boundaries, no edges where water meets land. The infinity pool stretches before you like a sheet of polished obsidian, so perfectly still that it doubles the world above. Every leaf hanging from the air branches overhead appears twice, once in reality, once in this liquid mirror, and you find yourself momentarily uncertain which reflection is which. The water's surface sits so flush with the stone deck that it creates the illusion of walking on solid ground right up to the edge of sky itself. The temperature of the air changes here too, where the upper gardens held the cool dampness of mist and morning shadow. This lower terrace carries the faint warmth that water holds even in the early hours. The pool radiates a gentle heat that speaks of volcanic springs and mineral-rich earth. And as you settle onto the smooth stone edge, letting your feet slip into the perfectly warm water, you feel that heat travel slowly up your legs like silk ribbons unfurling. Your legs disappear into their own reflections, creating a strange and wonderful sensation of wholeness with this mirrored world. The water holds you with such buoyancy that you barely feel your own weight, as if the pool itself is lifting you, supporting not just your body but something deeper, some tension you didn't realize you'd been carrying. The mineral content gives the water a silky quality against your skin, different from any swimming pool or natural lake you've ever experienced. Above, the canopy creates a living ceiling of green that shifts and breathes with air currents you cannot feel down here in this sheltered space. Every movement of every leaf registers in the water's surface as a gentle tremor, a tiny disruption that sends concentric circles spreading outward in slow motion. These ripples catch the golden light filtering through the mist and scatter it into countless tiny suns that dance across your submerged legs and drift away toward the pool's invisible edge. The infinity edge itself works like magic, water flowing over the rim in a continuous sheet so thin it's nearly invisible, creating the illusion that the pool extends infinitely into the valley below. When you look out across this liquid horizon, the boundaries between water and air, between this terrace and the distant landscape, simply disappear. It's as if you are floating at the edge of the world, suspended between earth and sky in a space that exists only in this moment, only for you. Birds begin to discover this mirror as the light grows stronger. A small tropical species with bright yellow markings alights on a branch directly above the pool. And immediately, there are two birds, one in the air, one in the water, performing a perfectly synchronized dance as the real bird shifts its weight and adjusts its grip on the swaying branch. You watch, mesmerized, as more join them. Soon the water holds an entire inverted aviary, each reflected bird as vivid and detailed as its airborne counterpart. The sound here is different from anywhere else in the gardens. The overflow creates a whisper-soft waterfall as it cascades over the infinity edge. Not the rush and tumble of a natural falls, but a consistent, barely audible murmur that seems to emerge from the pool itself, rather than from any particular direction. This gentle sound mingles with the morning birds and the rustle of leaves to create something that isn't quite silence, but isn't quite noise either. It's a cushion of sound that seems to wrap around you and hold space for whatever thoughts or feelings want to arise. As you lower yourself deeper into the pool, the warm water rises to embrace your waist, then your chest. The mineral-rich liquid seems to have substance beyond ordinary water, a slight viscosity that makes every movement feel deliberate and graceful. When you lift your hand and let drops fall from your fingers, they create perfect circles that expand outward, temporarily fracturing the reflected leaves above before settling back into perfect mirror clarity. The stone beneath your feet has been shaped smooth by countless seasons of use, and you can feel the subtle texture of mineral deposits that have built up over time. This isn't artificial stone, but something that feels connected to the volcanic earth of Bali itself, as if the pool has grown from the landscape rather than been imposed upon it. The warmth in the stone matches the warmth of the water so perfectly that when you sit on the submerged bench along one edge, it's impossible to tell where stone ends and liquid begins. Floating flowers have appeared on the surface, frangipani blossoms like the ones you noticed earlier, but also others you haven't seen yet. Brilliant orange blooms that might be from flame trees, delicate white flowers with yellow centers, and something deep purple that releases a subtle vanilla scent when the gentle current brings it near. These flowers don't disturb the pool's reflective properties, but seem to enhance them, creating small islands of color that exist simultaneously above and below the surface. The mist continues to thin as morning progresses, and now you can make out more of the landscape beyond the infinity edge. Rolling hills covered in the same lush vegetation that surrounds you here. Patches of rice terraces carved into distant slopes like green staircases. And the suggestion of other buildings, perhaps other parts of this same resort, nestled so harmoniously into the landscape that they seem to have grown there naturally. When you close your eyes and simply float, supported by the mineral-rich water, the sensory experience shifts entirely. Without sight to anchor you, the warmth becomes everything. It surrounds you completely, seeping into muscles you didn't know were tense, dissolving knots of stress that have been hiding in your shoulders and neck for longer than you can remember. The water's slight mineral taste touches your lips when you smile, a clean, slightly alkaline flavor that speaks of deep earth and ancient springs. The sounds grow more distinct in this floating darkness behind your closed eyelids. You can separate the whisper of water over the infinity edge from the gentle lap of tiny waves against the pool's sides. The bird songs become individual conversations. A liquid trill from somewhere to your left, answered by a similar call from across the water. The rustle and snap of small creatures moving through the canopy above. The almost inaudible hum of insects that seems less like sound and more like the vibration of life itself. Opening your eyes reveals that the world has grown brighter still. The golden quality of light has deepened, taking on warmer tones that suggest the sun, though still hidden by mist, has climbed higher in the morning sky. This richer light transforms the pool's reflective surface into something more complex than a simple mirror. Now it captures not just the shapes of leaves and branches, but their colors too. The deep emerald of mature fronds, the lighter green of new growth, the brown and grey variations in bark texture, all rendered in perfect detail on the water's surface. You notice that your own reflection has changed as well. The warm water and gentle mineral content have brought a soft glow to your skin, and your hair moves differently in this buoyant environment, floating in slow tendrils that create their own graceful patterns. When you move your arms through the water, they leave temporary trails of disturbed surface that catch and scatter light before smoothing back to perfect reflection. The flowers continue their lazy circuit around the pool, carried by currents so gentle they're almost imperceptible. Watching them, you realize that the water is in constant, subtle motion. Despite its mirror-like appearance, there must be a sophisticated system of inflows and outflows creating this circulation. But it's so well designed that it enhances rather than disrupts the pool's serenity. The floating blooms trace slow, ever-changing patterns across the surface, occasionally clustering together before drifting apart again, like a living mandala that reforms itself continuously. As you float there, perfectly supported by the warm, mineral-rich water, watching the slow dance of reflected leaves and floating flowers while listening to the gentle whisper of water over stone, time seems to lose its usual meaning. Minutes might be hours, or hours might be minutes. The pool creates its own temporal space, a pocket of existence where the only clock is the gradually shifting quality of light and the lazy progress of blossoms across the water's surface. Your body feels different here, not just relaxed, but somehow more aligned, as if the water's mineral content is actually nourishing your skin, while the perfect temperature allows every muscle to find its natural length and position. There's something therapeutic about this floating, something that goes beyond simple relaxation to touch places in your body that rarely get attention in ordinary life. Your breathing has slowed to match the pool's rhythms, deep and unhurried, and with each exhale, you feel more completely present in this moment, in this water, in this reflection of sky and leaves that holds you so perfectly. As you float in this perfect stillness, your gaze begins to drift beyond the pool's edge, following a narrow stone pathway that curves away from the water through dense tropical foliage. The path itself seems almost secretive, partially obscured by trailing vines and the drooping fronds of tree ferns that create a natural archway. Your body continues to rest in the warm embrace of the water, but your mind starts to wander along this mysterious road, curious about where it might lead. The stones are dark volcanic rock, worn smooth by countless rainfalls, and they seem to beckon with the promise of discovery. Without quite realizing when you made the decision, you find yourself gently pushing toward the pool's edge, your movements creating the softest ripples that catch fragments of dappled sunlight. The transition from water to air happens gradually, your skin meeting the gentle warmth of the afternoon breeze that carries with it the distinctive perfume of something extraordinary. It's a scent unlike anything you've encountered before, sweet but complex, with layers that seem to reveal themselves slowly, like a musical composition unfolding note by note. Your feet find purchase on the smooth stones of the pathway, still warm from your time in the water, and you begin to follow this hidden route through what reveals itself to be a living corridor of green. The foliage on either side grows thick and lush, creating an intimate tunnel effect that makes the world beyond seem to disappear entirely. Overhead, branches interweave to form a canopy that filters the sunlight into constantly shifting patterns of gold and shadow that play across your skin as you walk. The temperature here feels perfectly modulated, as if the very air has been naturally conditioned by the surrounding vegetation. The pathway begins to climb slightly, winding upward through what you gradually realize are carefully constructed terraces carved into the hillside. But these aren't ordinary garden terraces. Each level reveals something magnificent. Orchids. Hundreds upon hundreds of orchids in varieties and colors that seem to span every possibility of nature's palette. Some cascade in waterfalls of white and cream, their petals so delicate they appear translucent when backlit by filtered sunlight. Others stand in proud clusters of deep purple and burgundy, their blooms substantial and velvety, almost architectural in their precise symmetry. The scent that first drew you along this path now reveals its source, and you understand why it seemed so complex and layered. Each variety of orchid contributes its own signature to the air, some offering notes of vanilla and honey, others adding hints of citrus or spice, creating an olfactory symphony that seems to change with every step you take along the ascending pathway. Each seating area offers its own perspective on the orchid terraces, its own intimate relationship with particular groupings of plants. As you step into this remarkable space, you immediately understand that this is a place designed for contemplation, for the kind of quiet appreciation that allows beauty to work its subtle magic on the human spirit. There's nothing hurried or demanding about the pavilion. It simply offers itself as a perfect vantage point from which to absorb the extraordinary garden that surrounds it. The acoustics within the pavilion seem particularly refined. The sounds of the water moving through the terraces, the gentle whisper of breeze through the orchid leaves, and the occasional soft bird call all seem enhanced and clarified, as if the structure itself had been designed to create the perfect listening environment for the garden's natural music. You choose one of the cushioned platforms and settle yourself comfortably, immediately understanding why this spot was chosen for the pavilion. From here, the view encompasses multiple levels of the orchid terraces, creating a living panorama that changes subtly as your eye moves from one level to another. The late afternoon light slants through the garden at just the right angle to illuminate certain blooms, while creating mysterious shadows in other areas, giving the entire scene a quality that seems almost painted rather than real. The air moving through the pavilion carries with it the complex perfume of hundreds of different orchids, but somehow the scent here feels more concentrated and refined than it did along the pathway. Perhaps it's the way the structure channels and focuses the air currents, or perhaps it's simply that this elevation provides the perfect perspective for appreciating the garden's aromatic complexity. Each breath brings new discoveries. Now a hint of something lemony and fresh. Now a warmer note of vanilla or honey. Now something more mysterious and exotic that you can't quite identify but find utterly captivating. From your comfortable position within the pavilion, you begin to notice details that weren't visible from the pathway. The irrigation system that keeps these orchids thriving is itself a work of art. Thin channels of water move between the terraces in patterns that seem both functional and decorative. Small waterfalls carry moisture from one level to another, creating humidity and providing the gentle sound that forms the garden's natural soundtrack. The engineering required to create such a system must have been considerable, yet it's been executed so seamlessly. that it appears entirely natural. As you rest in this extraordinary pavilion, surrounded by one of nature's most spectacular displays, you begin to feel a profound sense of connection to something larger than yourself. This place represents the perfect collaboration between human creativity and natural beauty, neither dominating the other, but working together to create something more magnificent than either could achieve alone. The orchids provide the raw material of beauty, but human understanding and care have arranged them in ways that amplify and celebrate their individual characteristics, while creating harmonies that reveal new possibilities. Your breathing has naturally slowed to match the peaceful rhythm of this place, and you find yourself settling more deeply into the cushions, more completely into this moment of perfect stillness within beauty. The pavilion holds you gently, offering the ideal balance of shelter and openness, privacy and connection. Here, time seems to move differently, more slowly, as if the very air were infused with the patience required to truly appreciate something this extraordinary. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the garden's perfume and gentle sounds wash over you, and feel yourself becoming part of this carefully orchestrated symphony of stone and water and living beauty. When you finally open your eyes again, the light has shifted subtly, carrying with it the distinctive quality of Balinese afternoon. Warmer now, more golden, filtering through the jasmine arbor overhead in patterns that dance and shimmer with each gentle breeze. The jasmine flowers, thousands of tiny white stars scattered across the latticed ceiling of living wood, release their fragrance in waves that seem to ebb and flow with your breathing. You notice how the scent deepens in the shade and lightens where the sun touches the blossoms, creating an olfactory map of light and shadow above you. From somewhere beyond the immediate circle of your awareness comes the soft percussion of bamboo wind chimes, their hollow notes creating a melody that seems to complement, rather than interrupt, the garden's natural rhythm. The sound arrives like scattered raindrops, irregular, but somehow perfectly timed, each note hanging in the warm air before gently dissolving. You realize that what you initially took for wind chimes might actually be bamboo segments knocking together somewhere in the grove beyond, nature creating her own gentle music without any human intervention. The anticipation of afternoon tea begins to manifest in small, almost imperceptible ways. Perhaps it's the way the light seems to gather itself more purposefully now, or how the garden's sounds have settled into that particular afternoon cadence that speaks of rituals about to begin. You sense movement somewhere beyond your immediate view, not hurried or intrusive, but purposeful and practiced, like the quiet preparations that happen behind the scenes of any well-orchestrated moment of hospitality. The jasmine arbor cradles you in its living architecture, and you become aware of how the climbing vines have been trained over what must be many years to create this perfect canopy. The interweaving branches form irregular hexagons and diamonds of filtered light, a natural stained glass window that projects shifting patterns across the stone table beside you. Each leaf is positioned as if by an artist's hand, though you know this beauty comes from years of patient guidance rather than sudden inspiration. Butterfly appears, Not the dramatic orange and black varieties you might expect in such a tropical setting, but something more subtle, pale yellow with markings like delicate calligraphy, brushstrokes across its wings. It settles on the edge of the stone table, fanning its wings slowly, and you find yourself studying the intricate patterns that seem almost too perfect to be natural. The butterfly's presence feels like a small gift, an unscheduled performer in this afternoon's gentle show. The first indication that tea service is approaching comes not through sight, but through the faintest suggestion of aroma, something warm and floral mingling with the jasmine, though different from it, perhaps chrysanthemum or lemongrass, or one of those delicate Indonesian blends that seem to capture the essence of the archipelago itself in a few dried leaves. The scent arrives so gradually that you can't pinpoint the moment it began, only that it's suddenly there, weaving itself into the existing symphony of fragrances. You hear the whisper of bare feet on stone pathways, so soft it might be imagined, followed by the gentle clink of porcelain, sounds that speak of someone approaching with the reverent care reserved for sacred rituals. And perhaps afternoon tea in a place like this is indeed sacred, a daily ceremony that honors both the garden's beauty and the human need for quiet reflection, for moments that exist outside the normal rush of hours and obligations. The stone beneath you has absorbed the day's warmth, creating a gentle heat that seems to rise through your body in slow waves. You shift slightly and feel how the cushions beneath you have molded themselves to your form, soft but supportive, covered in what feels like silk that has been warmed by filtered sunlight. Every surface you touch seems to have been kissed by the afternoon sun, holding just enough heat to feel welcoming without being overwhelming. A staff member approaches, though calling her simply a staff member seems inadequate for someone who moves with such quiet grace through this garden space. She appears to be middle-aged, with silver threading through her dark hair that has been arranged in a simple but elegant style. Her sarong is the color of sage leaves, and she moves as if she were part of the garden itself, belonging here so completely that her presence feels as natural as the jasmine overhead or the bamboo windsong in the distance. She carries a tray that catches the dappled light, not the formal silver service you might find in a hotel dining room, but something warmer and more personal. The teapot is ceramic, glazed in deep blue-green that reminds you of sea glass, with a handle that has been shaped by hands rather than machines. Beside it sit 2 cups, not matching, but clearly chosen to complement each other, one slightly larger than the other, both bearing the subtle irregularities that speak of individual craftsmanship. The woman sets the tray down with movements that seem choreographed by years of practice, each gesture economical but never hurried. She arranges the cups with small adjustments that speak of an artist's eye for balance, turning one slightly to catch the light better, shifting the other to align with some invisible geometry that pleases her sense of proportion. Her fingers are gentle but sure as she handles each piece, treating the simple ceramic as if it were precious crystal. Without words, though, she offers you a smile that somehow communicates welcome, respect, and understanding all at once, she begins to pour the tea. The liquid emerges from the pot in a steady amber stream that catches the filtered sunlight and seems to glow from within. Steam rises from each cup, carrying with it that delicate fragrance you detected earlier, now revealed as something complex and layered. Floral, yes, but with undertones that speak of earth and rain and growing things. She places a small plate beside the tea service, arranged with what appear to be traditional Indonesian sweets, small squares of something that might be coconut and palm sugar, dusted with what could be rice flour. Alongside, delicate cookies that look as if they were shaped by hand and decorated with edible flowers. Each piece is tiny, intended to be savored rather than consumed, perfect accompaniments to tea drunk slowly in a garden where time seems to move by different rules. The woman withdraws as quietly as she arrived, but not before making a small gesture, hands pressed together in front of her chest, a brief bow that acknowledges your presence while honoring the moment itself. You watch her disappear along a pathway that curves behind a stand of banana plants, their broad leaves creating a natural screen that swallows her completely within a few steps. Alone again with your tea and the garden's living presence, you reach for one of the cups, noting how it fits perfectly in your palms. Warm but not hot, substantial enough to feel grounding, but light enough to hold without effort. The ceramic has a slight texture under your fingers, and you can see tiny variations in the glaze where the kiln's fire created unique patterns in the surface. This imperfection makes it beautiful rather than flawed, a reminder that the most meaningful objects are often those that bear the subtle marks of human hands. You lift the cup toward your lips and pause, letting the steam bathe your face in fragrant warmth. The tea's aroma is even more complex up close. There's the floral element you detected earlier, but also something that might be ginger and perhaps a hint of cardamom, spices that warm rather than overwhelm. It's a blend that seems designed specifically for this time of day, this quality of light, this particular combination of tropical warmth and garden shade. The first sip confirms what the aroma promised. The tea is neither too strong nor too delicate, but perfectly balanced to complement rather than compete with the garden's own sensory offerings. It warms your throat and seems to spread that warmth through your chest and down into your arms, a gentle heat that mingles with the ambient temperature of the afternoon air. You can taste the care that went into both growing and preparing these leaves, the attention to timing and temperature that transforms simple ingredients into something approaching poetry. As you drink, the jasmine arbor seems to draw closer around you, not confining but embracing, creating a sense of intimate enclosure within the larger garden space. The afternoon light continues its slow dance through the leaves overhead, and you begin to notice patterns in how the shadows move, some quick and restless where thinner branches sway, others slow and stately where the main supports hold steady. It's like watching a very slow kaleidoscope, patterns forming and dissolving and reforming in endless variation. You reach for one of the small sweets, finding it soft, but with a slight resistance that gives way to reveal layers of flavor. Coconut, certainly. but also something that might be pandanus leaf, and a sweetness that tastes like palm sugar, but with additional complexity, as if multiple types of sugarcane or palm had been combined to create something entirely new. The texture dissolves slowly on your tongue, releasing flavors in stages, perfectly designed to be eaten between sips of tea in a ritual that could be extended almost indefinitely. The final notes of sweetness fade from your palate as you set the small cup back onto its saucer, the delicate porcelain making the softest whisper against itself. Your host gestures toward a stone pathway that curves away from the tea pavilion, disappearing between curtains of hanging vines and flowering jasmine that seem to cascade from somewhere high above. The stones beneath your feet are smooth river rocks, worn perfectly round by centuries of water flow, and they create a gentle percussion with each step, not quite clicking, more like whispered conversations between stone and soul. The path winds deeper into what feels like the heart of the resort's gardens, though you sense you're moving towards something far older than any planned landscape. The air grows cooler here, dense with moisture and the green scent of things that have been growing undisturbed for generations. Somewhere ahead, you can hear the sound of many small movements, not quite rustling, not quite stirring, as if the very air itself is alive with gentle activity. As you round a curve in the pathway, the source of the sounds becomes clear, and you find yourself stopping mid-step in quiet wonder. Before you rises what might be the most magnificent tree you have ever encountered, though calling it simply a tree feels inadequate for something so vast and complex. This is a banyan of impossible age and size, its original trunk now just one element in a living cathedral of interconnected pillars and arches that stretch in every direction. Hundreds of aerial roots have descended from the spreading branches over what must be centuries, each one growing thick and strong until it became a trunk in its own right, creating a forest within a forest, a natural temple whose boundaries seem to extend far beyond what your eyes can encompass. The sounds you heard were the voices of this living architecture, the soft creaking of massive branches shifting infinitesimally in the barely perceptible breeze, the whisper of leaves brushing against each other high overhead, the gentle drip of moisture condensing on the vast canopy above and finding its way down through layer after layer of green to finally reach the earth. Your host has led you to what is clearly the sacred center of this entire place, and you understand without words that you are welcome to explore this natural sanctuary at your own pace. You step from the stone pathway onto ground that feels entirely different beneath your feet, soft, springy, composed of centuries of fallen leaves that have composted into something that gives way just slightly with each step, like walking on the world's most perfect natural carpet. The earth here is dark and rich, and you can smell its deep fertility, that particular scent of soil that has been nurtured by the same tree for generations beyond counting. Small shoots and seedlings dot the ground between the banyan's many trunks, creating tiny gardens in the filtered light that manages to find its way through the dense canopy above. Moving between the massive root trunks feels like walking through the columns of some ancient temple. Though these pillars are alive, their bark textured with the accumulated wisdom of decades of growth. Some are perfectly straight and smooth, while others twist and curve as they descend from the branches above, creating organic archways and alcoves that invite quiet contemplation. You run your hand along one of these natural columns and feel the slight roughness of the bark, warm from the day's filtered sunlight, with tiny variations in texture that speak of seasons of growth, periods of abundance, and times of patience. The light here is unlike anywhere else you've been in these gardens. Instead of the direct golden warmth of the tea pavilion or the bright openness of the lotus pools, here the illumination filters down through so many layers of leaves that it arrives in constantly shifting patterns of green-tinged brightness. Shafts of light move slowly across the ground as branches high above sway almost imperceptibly, creating an ever-changing mosaic of brightness and shadow that transforms the space moment by moment. Sometimes, a patch of direct sunlight will find its way through the canopy to illuminate a section of trunk or a cluster of small flowers growing at the base of one of the root pillars, creating temporary spotlights in this natural theatre. You discover that there are places within the banyan's embrace where the aerial roots have grown so closely together that they've created natural alcoves, small private spaces just large enough for one person to sit comfortably. The ground in these spots is particularly soft, carpeted with tiny ferns and delicate flowers that seem to thrive in the protected microclimate created by the surrounding roots. You settle into one of these natural chairs, feeling the living walls curve around you with a presence that is both sheltering and infinitely patient. From this seated position, you can fully appreciate the complexity of the ecosystem that exists within the banyan's domain. High above, you catch glimpses of birds moving through the branches, not the bright tropical species you might expect, but smaller, more subtle creatures whose quiet chirping and soft movements add to the sense of this place as a sanctuary where life can flourish undisturbed. Occasionally, a single feather drifts down through the layers of the canopy, spiraling slowly in the still air before coming to rest on the forest floor, where it joins the countless other small offerings the tree receives from its many inhabitants. The moisture in the air here is almost palpable, creating a natural humidity that makes your skin feel soft and your breathing deeper and more relaxed. This isn't the sharp freshness of ocean air or the dry warmth of desert climates, but something more enveloping, like being wrapped in the gentlest possible embrace of the natural world. You can taste this moisture slightly when you breathe, clean and green with the faintest sweetness, as if the very air has been filtered through layers of living leaves and bark until it carries only the purest essence of growing things. As you sit in the quiet stillness, you become aware of how the sounds of this place layer together to create something that is less like silence and more like a very quiet symphony. There's the almost inaudible whisper of air moving through hundreds of thousands of leaves, each one contributing its tiny voice to a collective murmur that rises and falls with subtle rhythms. Beneath this, The occasional soft creak of wood adjusting to microscopic changes in temperature and humidity creates a deeper percussion, while the gentle drip of condensed moisture provides an irregular but constant counterpoint, each drop finding its own path down through the branching architecture above. Sometimes you hear the soft rustle of small creatures moving through the leaf litter, not scurrying or hurrying, but moving with the unhurried confidence of beings who know they are safe in this protected place. You catch glimpses of tiny lizards sunning themselves on patches of bark where the filtered light creates warm spots. Their movements so slow and deliberate that they seem to be practicing their own form of meditation. Even the insects here seem to move with unusual tranquility, their buzzing softer and more musical than the urgent sounds of the outside world. The root trunk that forms the back of your natural alcove has developed fascinating textures over its long life. Close examination reveals patterns in the bark that look almost like written script, flowing curves and intersecting lines that could be the tree's way of recording the history it has witnessed. Your fingers trace these natural inscriptions, feeling how some areas are smoother, where perhaps generations of visitors have touched them, while others maintain the rougher texture of undisturbed growth. The bark is warm under your touch, and you can sense, however faintly, the movement of life within, the slow circulation of nutrients and water that keeps this ancient giant alive and growing. Looking up through the network of branches and aerial roots above your head is like gazing into a three-dimensional mandala of almost infinite complexity. Each branch divides and subdivides, creating patterns within patterns that seem to follow some mathematical principle, too subtle for conscious understanding but perfectly comprehensible to some deeper part of your awareness. The aerial roots hang at various stages of their journey toward the earth, some still thin and flexible, swaying slightly in the minimal air movement, others thick and established, having already found their purchase in the soil and begun their transformation into new trunks. The temperature in this natural sanctuary shifts subtly as you sit, responding to changes in the light filtering through the canopy and the gentle circulation of air between the many trunks. Sometimes a breath of slightly cooler air will move through the space, carrying with it the sense of different parts of the garden, a hint of frangipani from somewhere to the east, the green smell of fresh water from a stream you haven't yet discovered, or the complex fragrance of flowers that bloom only in the deepest shade. These scent messages arrive and fade like gentle reminders of the larger world beyond this intimate enclosure. But they don't disturb the profound sense of peace that seems to emanate from the ancient tree itself. Time behaves differently here, flowing with the same unhurried rhythm that governs the growth of aerial roots and the patient accumulation of composted leaves on the forest floor. Minutes or hours might pass as you sit in quiet communion with this living architecture, and it would make no difference to the tree, which measures time in seasons and decades rather than moments. Your breathing naturally synchronizes with the subtle rhythms of this place, becoming deeper and more spacious, as if your lungs are learning to process not just air, but the accumulated wisdom of centuries of patient growth. The longer you remain in the banyan's embrace, the more you notice details that reveal themselves only to sustained attention. Tiny flowers appear in clusters along some of the aerial roots, so small they're nearly invisible, but sweetly fragrant when the air moves just right. Delicate spider webs span the spaces. Between roots and branches, their silk invisible until a shaft of filtered sunlight catches them at precisely the right angle, revealing geometric masterpieces that put human architecture to shame. Small butterflies move through these spaces with extraordinary grace, their wings catching occasional glints of light as they navigate the complex three-dimensional maze of the tree's interior with what seems like perfect familiarity. As your time in this sacred space continues, you begin to understand that you're experiencing something rare and precious, not just a remarkable tree, but a living temple that has been growing and evolving for longer than human memory, creating a sanctuary where the boundary between the natural and the spiritual becomes meaningless. This living temple seems to pulse with its own rhythm now, a gentle breathing that matches the late afternoon as golden hour approaches. The light filtering through the canopy has begun to shift, taking on that particular quality that announces the sun's descent toward the horizon. You sense it's time to move onward, to follow the path that leads deeper into the resort's heart, where the lotus pond waits in its secluded hollow. Your feet find the stepping stones naturally, each one worn smooth by countless visitors who have made this same pilgrimage toward evening contemplation. The stones are still warm from the day's heat, their surface holding memories of sunshine, even as shadows begin to lengthen. Between them, shallow channels of water move with barely audible whispers, carrying fallen petals and leaves on journeys that seem unhurried and purposeful. The path curves gently downward, following the natural contours of the land as it guides you away from the ancient tree and toward a different kind of sanctuary. Here, the vegetation changes subtly. The towering palms give way to more delicate plantings, ornamental grasses that bend gracefully in the evening breeze, and clusters of tropical flowers that seem to glow more vividly as the light grows golden. As you round the final bend, the lotus pond reveals itself in all its evening splendor. The water stretches before you in a perfect oval, its surface so still it might be polished obsidian, reflecting not just the sky above, but seeming to hold depths that extend far beyond its physical boundaries. The pond is larger than you expected, perhaps 30 feet across at its widest point, cradled in a natural depression that gives it the feeling of being a secret held by the earth itself. The lotus flowers float serenely across the water's surface, some fully opened to reveal their layered petals in shades of pink and cream. Others still tightly furled in elegant buds that promise tomorrow's blooming. The leaves spread wide beside them, circular platforms of deep green that rest so perfectly flat they seem to have been placed by an artist's careful hand. Water beads on their waxy surfaces, each droplet catching the slanted sunlight like a tiny prism. At the pond's eastern edge, a simple wooden platform extends over the water, weathered teak that has been smoothed by weather and time into something that feels almost organic. Silk cushions in deep burgundy and gold wait there, positioned perfectly for meditation, their surfaces soft and inviting. This is clearly where you're meant to settle for the evening's quiet contemplation. You step onto the platform, feeling its gentle give beneath your weight, the subtle way it seems to float on the water's surface while remaining perfectly stable. The cushions welcome you with their warmth. They've been absorbing sunlight all day, and now they release it slowly, like a gentle embrace for your tired body. As you settle cross-legged, or in whatever position feels most natural, the platform seems to become part of you, an extension of your own peaceful intentions. From this vantage point, the pond reveals its true magic. The water is so clear you can see straight to the bottom, where smooth river stones create patterns in amber and grey. Tiny fish move between the lotus stems, their scales catching glints of light as they weave through their underwater garden. Their movements are unhurried, purposeful, as if they too understand the sacred nature of this place and the approaching golden hour. The air here carries different fragrances than those you experience beneath the great tree. The lotus blossoms contribute their own sweet perfume, subtle and clean, while the water itself seems to purify every scent that passes over it. There's jasmine blooming somewhere nearby, its intensity softened by distance, and the green smell of healthy water plants reaching toward the surface. Above you, the sky has begun its evening transformation. What was bright blue an hour ago now shows hints of deeper colors gathering at the edges, the first suggestions of the spectacular display to come. Palm fronds frame your view perfectly, their edges crisp against the changing canvas above. A few early stars have begun to appear, faint but steady, like distant lighthouse beacons calling across impossible distances. The sounds here are different too, more intimate, more immediate. Water laps gently against the platform's supports, a rhythm so soft, it's felt more than heard. Somewhere across the pond, a single bird calls, its voice clear and sweet in the growing stillness. The call is answered from another direction, creating a brief conversation that seems to acknowledge the approaching sunset. The daily transition from active day to contemplative evening. Your reflection wavers gently on the water's surface beside the lotus flowers, but it's not quite your reflection as you know it. The ripples soften all the edges, dissolving the boundaries between where you end and the evening begins. This mirror shows not just your physical form, but something deeper, the peace that has been growing within you throughout this day, the quiet joy that comes from moving slowly through beautiful spaces. As you settle more deeply into meditation, your breathing naturally synchronizes with the gentle movements around you. The lotus leaves rise and fall almost imperceptibly with tiny currents in the pond. The fish below continue their graceful swimming, creating the slightest disturbances that spread in perfect circles before fading into stillness. Even your heartbeat seems to find its place in this symphony of subtle rhythms. The meditation platform feels like a boat now, carrying you not across the pond, but across the transition from day into evening. Time moves differently here, measured not in minutes or hours, but in the gradual shift of light, the slowly changing colors reflected in the water. the way the lotus petals seem to glow more luminously as natural light begins to fade. A dragonfly arrives, hovering just above the water surface, before settling delicately on a nearby lotus leaf. Its wings are transparent films of iridescence, catching the golden light and throwing tiny rainbows across the water. It rests there completely still, as if it too has come to meditate, to witness the daily miracle of sunset painting itself across the sky. The western horizon has begun to show its true colors now. Orange and pink gather strength, building slowly like a symphony reaching toward crescendo. These colors paint themselves not just across the sky, but across the pond's surface as well, turning the water into a mirror of sunset that doubles the beauty surrounding you. The lotus flowers seem to absorb this light, their petals becoming luminous, as if lit from within by some gentle, eternal flame. Your meditation deepens without effort. There's nothing to force, nothing to strive for, simply this moment of being present to beauty, to the natural rhythms that continue their ancient patterns, whether witnessed or not. The platform beneath you feels like the most stable place on earth, a floating sanctuary where the boundary between water and sky, between yourself and the approaching evening, becomes wonderfully meaningless. Fish surface occasionally, their movements creating expanding circles that catch the changing light. These ripples travel slowly across the pond, carrying messages written in liquid language, spreading outward until they reach the edges where water plants bend gently to acknowledge their arrival. Everything here speaks in whispers, in subtle movements, in the kind of quiet communication that requires no words. The air temperature has begun its evening shift, that perfect moment when the day's warmth still lingers while the first hints of night's coolness arrive on gentle breezes. These air currents barely disturb the water's surface, creating the slightest texture that makes the reflected sunset shimmer like silk fabric moved by invisible hands. The lotus leaves respond to these breezes with tiny adjustments, slight turns that keep their surfaces perfectly positioned to catch the last of the golden light. As the sun continues its descent, you realize you're witnessing something that has happened every day for millennia. This same pond has reflected countless sunsets, welcomed countless visitors seeking peace, held space for meditation and contemplation through seasons and years beyond counting. You're part of an unbroken chain of quiet seekers who have found their way to this platform, these cushions, this perfect vantage point for watching the day transform into evening. The lotus flowers around you seem to pulse gently with the changing light, their beauty so profound it requires no interpretation, no analysis, simply presence, simply the willingness to receive what they're offering. Some spiritual traditions teach that the lotus represents enlightenment, the pure emerging from the depths. But here, now, they need no symbolic meaning. They are perfectly, completely themselves, and that is enough. As darkness continues its gentle claim on the evening sky, a new sound begins to weave itself through the tropical air. At first, it's so subtle you might mistake it for the wind moving through bamboo leaves, or perhaps the distant murmur of water finding its way over stones. But then the sound clarifies, becomes more distinct, and you recognize the metallic shimmer of gamelan music drifting up from somewhere deeper in the resort grounds. The bronze instruments seem to breathe with the evening itself, each note hanging in the humid air like drops of liquid metal before dissolving into the next phrase. From your position among the lotus pools, elevated in this natural amphitheater of hanging gardens, the music reaches you filtered through layers of vegetation, softened by broad banana leaves, refined by the delicate fronds of tree ferns, given texture by the dense canopy that stretches between you and its source. You find yourself naturally shifting position on your stone perch, not from discomfort, but from the music's gentle invitation to move, to settle more deeply into this acoustic embrace. The gamelan doesn't demand attention the way Western music might. Instead, it creates a sonic environment that surrounds and includes you. Each metallic voice in the ensemble, the deep, resonant gongs that seem to emerge from the earth itself, the bright dancing patterns of the metallophones, the punctuating strikes that mark time like a heartbeat. All of it blends into something that feels less like performance and more like prayer. The evening light continues to shift as the music plays, and you notice how the two phenomena seem to dance together. When the gamelan swells in one of its cyclical crescendos, the remaining daylight seems to pulse more golden through the leaves above you. During the quieter passages, when individual instruments emerge from the metallic chorus like soloists, the shadows deepen slightly, as if the garden is leaning in to listen more closely. A light breeze moves through the canopy, and suddenly, the music takes on new dimensions. The leaves themselves become part of the ensemble, adding their whispered percussion to the bronze voices below. The sound of wind through bamboo creates sustained notes that harmonize with the gongs, while the rustle of broader leaves provides a rhythm section as complex and subtle as any human drummer could devise. You close your eyes and let the gamelan wash over you more fully. With your visual sense temporarily set aside, the music becomes three-dimensional in a way you hadn't expected. You can hear how the sound travels up through the different levels of the garden, first encountering the dense understory of ferns and flowering shrubs, then rising through the middle canopy where orchids cling to tree trunks, finally reaching you here among the crown of palms and fruit trees. Each layer adds its own acoustic signature, its own subtle coloration to the bronze voices. The music seems to activate memories held within the plants themselves. You imagine the musicians below, seated cross-legged on woven mats, their hands moving with practiced precision over instruments that have been shaped and tuned by generations of craftsmen. But you also sense the longer history embedded in this place, centuries of similar music floating through similar tropical nights, the eternal conversation between human creativity and the breathing presence of the forest. Opening your eyes again, you are surprised to discover how much the light has changed during your musical reverie. The sky has deepened to a rich indigo, though it's still light enough to make out the individual leaves and flowers around you. The lotus blooms seem to glow with their own internal light now. their petals catching and holding whatever illumination remains. Some have begun to close slightly, responding to the approaching night with the same natural rhythm that governs the rise and fall of the gamelan phrases. A night-blooming jasmine somewhere in the canopy releases its first tentative fragrance of the evening, and the scent mingles with the music in your consciousness until you're not sure where one sensation ends and the other begins. The jasmine's perfume seems to ride the gamelan's rhythms, intensifying during the musical peaks and settling back during the quieter interludes. Other night scents begin to emerge as well. The green smell of cooling leaves, the faint sweetness of some unseen flowering vine, the mineral scent of stone and water as the evening moisture begins to condense on surfaces throughout the garden. The gamelan piece shifts into a new section, one that seems more contemplative than what came before. The metallic voices slow their conversation, leaving more space between notes, allowing silence to become an equal partner in the composition. During these quiet moments, the night sounds of the garden emerge more clearly. You hear the soft plash of a fish surfacing in one of the pools below, the gentle drip of water from a fountain you can't see, the barely audible rustle of some small creature moving through the undergrowth. You realize that you've been holding your breath without knowing it, and as you release it in a long, slow exhalation, you feel your body settling even more completely into this moment. The stone beneath you has retained some warmth from the day, and this residual heat seems to pulse in rhythm with the gongs. Your shoulders drop, your spine curves slightly, and you find yourself naturally swaying to the gamelan's gentle rhythms. A fruit bat flickers past overhead, its wings barely visible against the darkening sky. Its flight path seems choreographed to the music, weaving between hanging branches with the same fluid grace that characterizes the metallic melodies. More bats appear, their erratic flight patterns creating moving shadows against what little light remains. They're hunting insects, you know, but their movements seem too perfectly timed to the gamelan to be merely practical. The temperature has dropped several degrees since the music began, and the cooling air carries new fragrances and sounds. You can smell the earthier scents now, the rich humus of decomposing leaves, the mineral tang of wet stone, the green complexity of chlorophyll and sap and growing things. These deeper, more fundamental aromas ground the sweeter flower scents, creating an olfactory symphony as layered and complex as the music itself. The gamelan ensemble below must be seated in one of the resort's pavilions, probably surrounded by their own collection of tropical plants and softly lit by traditional lanterns. You imagine the warm glow illuminating the bronze instruments, catching the concentrated expressions of the musicians as they navigate the complex interwoven patterns of their ancient art form. Each player listens, not just to their own instrument, but to the entire sonic tapestry, adding their voice at precisely the right moment to maintain the delicate balance that makes gamelan so mesmerizing. A warm updraft carries the music more strongly for a moment, and you catch nuances you hadn't heard before. The subtle variations in attack and decay that give each bronze voice its personality, the tiny timing variations that prevent the ensemble from becoming mechanical, the almost inaudible intake of breath from one of the musicians. These human details make the music more intimate rather than less magical, reminding you that this beauty emerges from the marriage of human intention and metallic resonance. The darkness is nearly complete now, though your eyes have adjusted gradually enough that you can still make out the basic shapes around you. The lotus flowers seem to generate their own subtle luminescence, and you wonder if this is real or simply your perception adapting to the low light. The white and pale pink blooms are most visible, floating like gentle spirits on the dark water surface, while the deeper colored flowers have merged with the shadows. As if responding to the deepening night, the gamelan music becomes even more meditative. The rhythmic patterns slow further, and the spaces between notes stretch longer, creating a hypnotic pulse that seems to synchronize with your own breathing and heartbeat. This is music designed not for performance, but for transformation, intended to shift consciousness rather than simply entertain. You can feel it working on you at levels deeper than thought, adjusting your nervous system to match its ancient rhythms. The night air carries the music with such clarity that you can almost see the sound waves moving through the canopy, rippling through layers of leaves like gentle vibrations through water. Each tree and plant becomes a resonating chamber, modifying and enriching the bronze voices with its own acoustic properties. The bamboo adds brightness and percussive clarity, while the broader-leafed trees contribute warmth and sustain to the overall sound. You find yourself breathing more slowly, more deeply, drawing the music into your lungs along with the fragrant night air. The gamelan seems to be playing not just around you, but through you, as if your body has become another instrument in the ensemble. Your heartbeat finds the rhythm of the gongs. Your breathing matches the rise and fall of the melodic phrases, and your thoughts slow to match the contemplative pace of this ancient musical meditation. As the evening settles into full darkness around you, the gamelan continues its timeless conversation with the night, with the garden, and with something deep within your own being that recognizes this music as part of humanity's oldest dialogue with the sacred rhythms of existence. The gamelan's final notes drift away like incense on the night breeze, leaving behind a silence so complete it feels like a prayer answered. You find yourself drawn from your comfortable position, not by restlessness, but by a gentle magnetic pull toward the water gardens that lie beyond the pavilion's warm glow. Your bare feet touch the cool stone pathway, and immediately you feel the temperature difference. The marble still holds a whisper of the day's warmth, but the air carries the cooler breath of water and growing things. The transition from the pavilion to the water gardens feels like stepping from one world into another. Behind you, the last embers of the ceremonial fires cast their amber light across the bamboo antique structures. Ahead, the moonlight transforms everything into a study of silver and shadow. The full moon hangs directly overhead, like a benevolent eye, its light so bright it creates distinct shadows and illuminates the garden paths with surprising clarity. the first thing you notice is the sound, or rather, the symphony of sounds the water makes when it's allowed to move freely through a carefully designed landscape. There's the gentle lapping of the main reflecting pool, its surface disturbed only by the occasional night breeze. But listen more carefully, and you discover layers upon layers of aquatic music. Somewhere to your left, water trickles down a series of carved stone channels, each level creating its own pitch as the liquid finds different depths and surfaces. To your right, a small fountain sends droplets dancing back into a circular basin, each drop creating tiny percussion notes that blend into a rhythm as complex as the gamelan you've just left behind. Kyothum path curves along the edge of the largest reflecting pool, and you pause to take in the extraordinary sight before you. The moon's reflection sits perfectly centered in the dark mirror of the water. But it's not alone. Floating lotus flowers, their waxy white petals luminous in the moonlight, create a constellation across the pool's surface. Some flowers are fully open, their broad petals spread wide like welcoming hands. Others remain partly closed, creating elegant goblet shapes that hold small pools of shadow within their curves. The air here carries a completely different fragrance than the flower gardens you explored earlier. The water adds a clean mineral freshness that seems to cleanse your lungs with each breath. The lotus blossoms contribute their own subtle perfume, not sweet like frangipani or jasmine, but something more ancient and mysterious, a scent that speaks of deep roots and patient blooming. You continue along the pathway, your steps unhurried and contemplative. The stones beneath your feet are smooth river rocks, carefully selected and placed to create a surface that massages your soles with each step. Between the larger stones, soft moss has been encouraged to grow, creating cushioned spots that feel like velvet against your skin. Occasionally, your foot encounters a small puddle where the garden's irrigation system has left its gentle mark. The water warm from the day's sun, a tiny thermal pool that makes you smile. A wooden bridge appears ahead, its construction so seamlessly integrated into the landscape that it seems to have grown from the water itself. The wood is teak, weathered to a silver grey that matches the moonlight, and as you step onto its surface, it yields slightly under your weight with a soft, almost musical creak. The bridge spans a narrow channel where water flows from the higher pools down to the main reflecting basin. Standing at its center, you're surrounded by the gentle sound of moving water on all sides. From this vantage point, you can see the entire water garden spread out in the moonlight, like a masterpiece painted in silver and black. The designer of this space understood something profound about the relationship between water, light, and the human soul. Every pool, every channel, every carefully placed stone seems positioned to catch and hold the moon's radiance in a different way. The largest pool stretches away to your right, its surface so still, it perfectly doubles the night sky above. Stars scatter across its dark mirror, creating the illusion that you're suspended between two identical heavens. Palm fronds lean over the water's edge, their reflections creating graceful arcs that frame the celestial display below. When a gentle breeze stirs the surface, the reflected stars dance and shimmer, breaking into countless points of light that reassemble themselves as the water stills. To your left, a series of smaller, interconnected pools create a chain of liquid jewels, each one a slightly different shape, each one catching the moonlight at a unique angle. In the nearest pool, you notice movement, not the sudden splash of a frog or the darting of fish, but something more subtle. Leaning closer, you realize you're watching water striders, those miraculous insects that walk on the surface tension of still water. In the moonlight, they move like tiny spirits, creating small ripples that spread in perfect circles, intersecting and overlapping in patterns that seem almost too beautiful to be accidental. The bridge sways almost imperceptibly as you shift your weight, reminding you that you're part of this living system, not just an observer. The gentle motion feels like being rocked in the world's most peaceful cradle. You rest your hands on the smooth wooden railing and let yourself simply be present in this moment, breathing in the cool, water-scented air and feeling the night's tranquility settle into your bones. A soft splashing draws your attention to the far end of the main pool, where a small waterfall cascades down an arrangement of natural rocks. The water catches the moonlight as it falls, creating what looks like a curtain of liquid silver. The sound it makes is neither loud nor overwhelming. Instead, it provides a constant, gentle background note that seems to slow your heartbeat and deepen your breathing without any conscious effort on your part. You decide to make your way toward this waterfall, crossing to the other side of the bridge and following a path that winds between smaller pools and carefully tended aquatic plants. Night-blooming water lilies dot these smaller basins, their pale flowers creating points of ethereal light against the dark water. Some have closed for the night, their petals wrapped tight like sleeping faces, while others remain open, their centers glowing pearl white in the lunar radiance. The plants growing along the water's edges tell their own moonlit story. Tall grasses bend gracefully over the pools, their seed heads catching dewdrops that sparkle like tiny diamonds. Ferns unfurl from the rocky crevices, where the waterfall's spray keeps them perpetually misted, their fronds creating intricate shadow patterns on the surrounding stones. Everything here seems designed by nature and enhanced by human understanding to create the most peaceful environment imaginable. As you approach the waterfall, the air becomes noticeably cooler and more humid. The spray creates a microclimate that feels like a gentle caress against your skin. You find a smooth boulder, positioned perfectly for sitting, its surface worn smooth by countless visitors who have discovered this same magnetic draw to moving water in moonlight. The stone holds just a hint of the day's warmth, creating a perfect contrast to the cool air and gentle mist. From this position, you can observe the waterfall's hypnotic dance more closely. The water doesn't fall in a single sheet, but rather in multiple streams that separate and rejoin, creating a constantly changing pattern of liquid sculptures. Some streams are thick and steady, others break into droplets that catch the light like falling stars. Where the water meets the pool below, it creates circles within circles of ripples, each ring expanding outward until it meets the rings created by neighboring streams. The pool at the waterfall's base is deeper than the others, and in the moonlight, its depths appear mysterious and inviting. Occasionally, you catch a glimpse of movement below the surface. Perhaps koi that have found their way into this natural sanctuary, or simply the play of light and shadow that makes still water seem alive with possibility. You close your eyes and let the sound of falling water fill your consciousness completely. It's remarkable how this simple, natural phenomenon can quiet the mind so effectively. Each droplet's individual impact becomes part of a larger rhythm, and that rhythm seems to synchronize with your own internal rhythms, your heartbeat, your breathing, the gentle pulse of blood through your veins. Opening your eyes again, you notice how the waterfall has changed the quality of light around you. The spray catches moonbeams and scatters them in subtle rainbows that appear and disappear too quickly to focus on directly, but which create an overall sense of magic and wonder. The rocks behind the falling water are dark and mysterious, their surfaces slick with moisture and decorated with delicate mosses that seem to glow with their own inner light. The temperature here is perfect, cool enough to feel refreshing after the day's warmth, but not so cool as to create any discomfort. The humidity from the waterfall creates an almost tropical microclimate that makes your skin feel soft and hydrated. Each breath you take seems to cleanse your lungs more thoroughly than the last, as if the negatively charged ions created by falling water are actively purifying the air around you. Time seems to move differently here in the water gardens. Minutes could be passing, or hours, it doesn't matter. The moon continues its slow journey across the star-scattered sky, its reflection dancing across the various pools and streams in a display that feels both ancient and eternally new. This is the same moonlight that has illuminated water gardens for thousands of years, the same interplay of light and liquid that has drawn humans to sit quietly beside pools and streams since the beginning of consciousness itself. This gentle communion with moonlight and water creates a natural transition. Your feet seem to remember a pathway, one that the gardeners showed you earlier, but which your conscious mind had almost forgotten. It leads behind the largest waterfall, where the sound of cascading water grows deeper, more resonant, creating a kind of acoustic cocoon. You find yourself following this barely visible trail, stones worn smooth by centuries of bare feet, each step taking you closer to that thunderous yet somehow soothing wall of falling water. The path curves behind a curtain of bamboo, and suddenly you're walking through a fine mist that kisses your skin with the coolest touch. The waterfall's voice changes as you approach. Less of the bright splashing you hear from a distance, and more of a deep, continuous note that seems to resonate in your chest cavity. It's the kind of sound that makes your breathing naturally slow and deepen, as if the falling water is teaching your lungs its own rhythm of rise and release. Behind this veil of water, almost invisible unless you know exactly where to look, there's an opening in the volcanic rock. Not a cave exactly, but a natural alcove, carved by thousands of years of patient water, a secret grotto that feels like stepping into the Earth's own private meditation room. The entrance is narrow enough that you need to turn slightly sideways, and as you slip through, the sound of the waterfall becomes simultaneously more muffled and more profound. like being inside a giant seashell held to the earth's ear. Your position by this particular pool, which felt like a destination in itself, now reveals itself as part of a greater journey, one that has no beginning and no ending, but simply continues, like the water's endless cycle of falling and rising, flowing and returning. You could follow these paths for hours, discovering new pools, new waterfalls, new places where stone and water and growing things have collaborated to create beauty that serves no purpose except to exist, to be itself, to offer its quiet gift to anyone willing to receive it with patience and attention. The warmth in the air increases so gradually you barely notice, until suddenly you realize that the coolness of night has been replaced by something softer, more embracing. This warmth doesn't come from the sun, that's still hidden beyond the horizon, but seems to rise from the earth itself, from the stones that have been storing heat for decades, from the water that has been warmed by its journey through underground springs, from the very air that has been breathing with tropical life throughout the darkness. It's warmth that speaks of safety, of being held, of having found exactly the right place to be. Your eyes grow heavy with this deep contentment, not the heaviness of tiredness, but the weight of complete satisfaction, like a flower that has received all the light and water it could possibly need, and now has nothing left to do but rest in its own perfection. The mist continues to rise around you, carrying with it the dreams of every plant and tree in the gardens, every root system and flower, every drop of water that has ever fallen here, and every stone that has ever provided support for something green and growing. The first real light begins to touch the highest parts of the garden now, not direct sunlight, but the reflection of sunrise still hidden behind hills and buildings. The sky's gentle brightening, finally strong enough to find its way through the mist and canopy to these sacred spaces. This light moves like honey through air, golden and slow, touching the tips of the tallest palms first, before gradually working its way down through the layers of green, illuminating each level in turn. It's light that has learned patience from its journey, light that knows how to arrive gently rather than announce itself with drama. Everything it touches seems to glow from within. Water drops on leaves become tiny suns. The mist transforms into floating silk, and even the stones take on a warmth that speaks of ancient knowledge and endless endurance. You're witnessing the daily miracle that happens in this place, the moment when night's quiet protection gives way to day's generous illumination, when the gardens transform themselves from a place of rest into a celebration of life itself, all without losing any of their essential peace. Your breathing becomes even softer now. Each breath barely disturbs the air, as gentle as the mist that continues to rise and flow around you. Your heartbeat finds its slowest, most peaceful rhythm, synchronized with the earth's own pulse, with the patient circulation of water through stone and soil, with the unhurried breathing of sleeping flowers that will soon open to greet the coming light. Everything in your body settles into this deep harmony, finding its most natural pace, its most comfortable state of being. The waterfall's song grows quieter in your awareness, not because it has changed, but because you have become so attuned to it that it's no longer separate from your own internal rhythms, the falling water and your flowing breath, the pool's gentle ripples and your pulse's steady waves, the mist's rising spirals and your consciousness's soft floating. All of these become aspects of the same peaceful dance, the same wordless prayer of gratitude for existence itself. Light continues to grow, so gently, touching more leaves now, more stone pathways, more pools reflecting sky. The mist grows brighter, carrying light within itself, like clouds made of dawn. Everything becomes softer, quieter, more like a dream of gardens than gardens themselves. Your eyes close completely now, no longer needed, because you can feel the light instead of seeing it, can sense the water's presence, the stone's support. Thank you for traveling with Sleepy Travel Stories. May your dreams take you to beautiful places tonight. Sleep well, and we'll see you on the next journey.